Picture the most driven boss you have ever worked for. The one with the electric vision who could walk into a room and make everyone believe that this one impossible goal was the only thing that mattered. Now picture that same person quietly deciding the company's real mission is no longer to make money, or serve customers, or keep anyone employed. It is to settle a personal score. And picture the whole crew, mortgages, families, futures, strapped to that private grudge and steered at full speed straight over the horizon. That is Moby-Dick. Everyone files it under sea adventure. A big fish, a peg-legged captain, a lot of pages about whales. But strip away the salt and the rigging, and you are left with one of the most frightening leadership studies ever written. The story of a functioning organization captured, top to bottom, by one man's obsession, and dressed up as destiny so completely that almost nobody on board can bring themselves to say the obvious thing, that they are all going to die, and for nothing. The captain is Ahab. The company is a whaling ship, the Pequod, a real business with investors, a payroll, and a job to do. And the white whale that bit off Ahab's leg is not really a whale at all by the time the book is done. It is every private wound a leader refuses to heal, every vendetta rebranded as a vision, every impossible target that swallows a team whole. This is not a fish story. It is the oldest warning we have about what happens when one person's pain becomes everybody's job. The book is Moby-Dick, published in 1851 by Herman Melville, an American writer who had gone to sea himself, on merchant ships, on a whaler, even living for a time among islanders in the South Pacific. He knew the trade from the inside, the stink of the try-works, the boredom, the sudden violence, the strange men thrown together in a wooden world months from land. He poured all of it into this book and dedicated it to his friend and neighbor Nathaniel Hawthorne, convinced he had written something great. He had, but almost no one agreed. Moby-Dick sold poorly, baffled reviewers, and Melville died in near obscurity 40 years later, a customs inspector on the New York docks, his masterpiece essentially forgotten. It was only in the 1920s that the world circled back and understood what he had made. Part of what threw readers is that the book refuses to stay a thriller. Melville keeps stopping the chase to lecture you on whale anatomy, on rope, on blubber, on the color white. Long, strange digressions that test your patience, and if you let them, slowly turn a fishing trip into a meditation on obsession, on God, on the unknowable. And he tells it all through a narrator who is really more of a witness, a wandering, watchful young man who signs onto the Pequod and lives to report what happened. Everything you learn about Ahab, you learn over this man's shoulder, which matters enormously because in the end, he is the one person on that ship who survives. And there is a reason the survivor is the observer, not the true believer. Keep that in the back of your mind. The one who lives is the one who never fully drank the wine. Here is the whole book in one sentence. Moby-Dick is the story of a captain who secretly swaps his company's real mission, hunting whales for oil and profit, for a private act of revenge, and uses his charisma, his authority, and the sheer force of his obsession to bind an entire crew to a target that cannot be reached and can only destroy them. That is the engine under all 600 pages. Not man against nature, not even man against fate. It is one man's refusal to let a wound go and the terrifying ease with which a leader can make his personal pain the whole organization's purpose. Ahab does not seize the ship by force. He does something far more modern and far more chilling. He makes the crew want it. He gives them a story so grand, so charged with meaning, that killing this one white whale comes to feel like the noblest thing they could possibly do with their lives, right up until the water closes over their heads. We will walk it in 5 beats. First, call me Ishmael, how you get strapped to the ship before you ever meet the man steering it. Second, the captain who never comes on deck. Third, the quarterdeck, where the real mission is finally revealed. Fourth, Starbuck's loaded musket, the one man who sees the cliff and still cannot stop it. And fifth, the chase, where the obsession collects its bill. Along the way, we will read the actual words Melville wrote, verified word for word against the public domain text, because the terror of this book lives in its language and in how reasonable madness can be made to sound. First beat, call me Ishmael. Those are the 3 most famous words in American literature, and they open the book like a hand extended in the dark. Melville writes simply, "Call me Ishmael." Our narrator is a melancholy young man who tells us that whenever the gloom in him grows too heavy, a grey, drizzly weather of the soul, he goes to sea to shake it off. He is running from himself, and he decides to sign on to a whaling voyage out of Nantucket. Before he ever boards, he ends up sharing a bed at a crowded inn with a heavily tattooed harpooner from the South Pacific named Queequeg, a so-called cannibal who turns out to be the most decent, loyal, and honest character in the entire book. The two become inseparable friends, and together they sign the papers for a ship called the Pequod. Here is the detail worth stopping on. They commit, sign the contract, pledge years of their lives, without ever having met the captain. He is ashore, unwell, unseen. The men who hire them speak of him in careful, half-nervous, half-reverent tones. And Ishmael signs anyway, seduced by the romance of the voyage, the promise of adventure, the sheer momentum of the thing. Look at how many people do exactly this. You fall in love with the mission, the brand, the story on the careers page. You sign the offer dazzled by the vision, and you never once get in a room with the person whose private wound is about to become your job description. The founder, who will not show his face during hiring, is not merely being shy. Very often, you are already on the ship before you understand who you are truly sailing for. Second beat, the captain who never comes on deck. The Pequod sails, and for days, Melville stretches it until it feels like weeks. Ahab does not appear. The ship runs, the crew works, and the man in command stays shut below in his cabin, a rumor more than a presence. When he finally emerges, the moment is unforgettable, and Melville makes sure you feel it before Ahab says a single word. He stands on the deck, balanced on a leg made of polished whale jawbone, his own leg taken by the white whale, and a livid scar runs down his face, and, it is hinted, the length of his whole body, like a seam of old lightning. He is grim, towering, magnetic, and utterly fixed. The crew does not need a speech. They can smell the obsession coming off him. Something about the man is already wrong, already burning, and everyone senses it long before they can name it. This is the quiet horror of the beat, an unhealed private injury carried right at the top, silently becoming the weather the whole ship lives inside. Think about the founder whose one old humiliation, a rival who wronged them, a deal that collapsed, a public failure they never processed, hardens into the entire culture of a company. Nobody is told to fear it. Nobody has to be. It radiates down from above and reorganizes everyone's behavior around a pain they did not cause and cannot see the bottom of. A leader's unexamined wound does not stay private. Given enough authority, it becomes the job description of every person underneath them. Ahab has not yet told the crew what they are really out here to do. He does not have to. They already work for his scar. Third beat, the quarterdeck. This is the hinge of the whole book, the all-hands meeting where the real mission gets revealed. Ahab calls every man on deck, and with theatrical brilliance, he nails a bright gold coin, a doubloon, to the mast. A reward, he cries, for the first man to sight one particular whale, a white-headed whale with a wrinkled brow and a crooked jaw. Moby-Dick. He whips the crew into a roaring frenzy of oaths until the ship's actual business, killing whales for oil, filling the hold, earning the wage everyone signed up for, has been quietly replaced by a single obsession that profits no one. Only the first mate, Starbuck, dares object, protesting that vengeance on a dumb brute that struck from blind instinct seems like madness, even blasphemy. And Ahab answers with the speech that gives the book its dark philosophy. All visible objects, man, are but as pasteboard masks, he says. Every visible thing is only a mask, and behind the white whale he sees a malicious force he is compelled to strike through. He confesses that the whale has become the vessel of everything he hates. He tasks me. He heaps me. I see in him outrageous strength, with an inscrutable malice sinewing it. That is a man who has poured his entire self into a grudge and christened it a calling. Watch the modern shape of it, the leader who stands up at the town hall and swaps the boring, profitable mission for a personal moonshot, wrapping private vengeance in the language of destiny. And the lone executive who says, plainly, "This is not our business," is instantly recast not as prudent, but as disloyal. Fourth beat, Starbuck's loaded musket. Of everyone aboard, the first mate Starbuck is the one who sees clearly. He is competent, brave, and sane. A careful, God-fearing man whose courage is the useful kind. Melville lets him say it in his own words. "I will have no man in my boat," said Starbuck, "who is not afraid of a whale." Meaning real courage is a clear-eyed estimate of danger, not a reckless contempt for it. Starbuck understands, better than anyone, that this voyage is now steered by a madman toward certain death, that Ahab has hijacked the ship for a private war none of them can win. And late in the book, Melville gives him his terrible moment. Alone in the night, Starbuck stands outside Ahab's cabin door, holding a loaded musket, seeing with total clarity that one shot would save 30 lives. The crew, the ship, himself. And he cannot do it. Loyalty, hierarchy, conscience, the sheer weight of the years already sunk into this voyage, all of it freezes his hand. He lowers the gun and goes on obeying, all the way to the bottom. Starbuck is the most painful figure in the book, precisely because he is neither a fool nor a fanatic. He is the good, capable second-in-command who watches the wall rushing toward them and still cannot break formation to stop it. Every failing organization has a Starbuck. The clear-eyed number 2, the officer, the engineer who filed the warning, the one who quietly knew. Disasters are rarely short of a person who saw it coming. What they lack is someone willing to pull the trigger on the plan, to be disloyal to the captain in order to stay loyal to the crew. Fifth beat: the chase. After a whole voyage of dread and omen, the white whale is finally sighted, and Ahab gets the confrontation he has bent every life on board toward. The chase lasts 3 days. Twice the whale smashes the small boats to splinters. Twice Ahab climbs back out of the sea, more possessed than before, waving off every sign that he should stop. On the 3rd day, he hurls his harpoon with his whole ruined soul behind it, screaming his defiance at the creature. Towards thee I roll, thou all-destroying but unconquering whale. To the last I grapple with thee. From hell's heart I stab at thee. For hate's sake, I spit my last breath at thee. Those are the last words of a man who would rather destroy himself than loosen his grip on a grievance. And the whale answers by turning on the ship itself. Moby-Dick rams the Pequod head-on, staving in her hull, and the great vessel goes down with almost every soul aboard, sucked under in a spinning vortex. Ahab is dragged to his own death by his own harpoon line, lashed to the very thing he hunted. Here is the detail that should chill any leader. The whale swims away, unharmed. The obsession does not even achieve its goal. The target survives, only the company sinks. And one man lives, Ishmael, the watcher, who floats free of the wreck clinging to a coffin and is picked up a day later by a passing ship. The believers all drown. The witness survives to tell it. Obsession dressed as vision has exactly one reliable product, and it is not the whale. It is the wreckage. So what does it all add up to? On the surface, Moby-Dick is an adventure. Harpoons, storms, a monster rising from the deep. But underneath the spray, Melville has written the definitive study of how a single person's obsession can capture and destroy an entire group of people who should have known better. Look at the anatomy of it, because it is a pattern you will meet in boardrooms and families and movements for the rest of your life. It starts with a wound the leader will not heal, Ahab's leg, Ahab's humiliation. The wound curdles into a fixed idea, a target that grows more important than survival itself. The leader then uses charisma, not force, to make everyone else adopt that target as their own, nailing the gold coin to the mast, converting a private grudge into a shared holy war. Dissent gets redefined as betrayal, so the one sane voice, Starbuck, is neutralized long before the end. And the crew, bound by loyalty and momentum and the story they have been sold, follows the obsession straight over the edge, right up to the instant the water takes them. Melville's genius is that he never lets Ahab be a cartoon villain. Ahab is magnificent, eloquent, courageous, almost noble. That is the whole warning. The obsession that sinks the ship does not arrive looking like madness. It arrives looking like conviction, like vision, like the most meaningful mission anyone has ever offered you. The most dangerous leaders are not the weak ones. They are the compelling ones who have quietly confused their private pain with everybody's purpose, and made it sound like an honor to sink beside them. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Learn to ask, of any mission handed to you with great intensity, whose wound is this really? When a leader, a boss, a founder, a parent, a movement lights up with absolute certainty about one all-consuming goal, the question that can save your life is not, is this exciting, but is this actually the mission? Or is it someone's unhealed injury wearing the costume of a mission? Ahab's crew never asked it. They felt the charge of his conviction and mistook it for their own purpose. And notice the two roles the book leaves you to choose between. There is Ahab, who lets a wound become his whole identity until it consumes everyone near him. And there is Starbuck, who sees the disaster with perfect clarity and still cannot break formation to stop it. Loyalty curdled into complicity. Neither of those is where you want to end up. The healthier move is the harder one. To keep enough distance from the story to notice when a shared goal has quietly stopped serving the people chasing it, and to be willing to say, out loud, "This is not our business," even when it costs you the captain's approval. And if you are the one at the top, the lesson lands even closer to home. Tend your own wounds before they become somebody else's job. Because the single most destructive thing a leader can do is not to fail. It is to succeed at binding good people to a target that only ever needed to be reached by them, and only ever truly mattered to you. Herman Melville spent his masterpiece building one patient, terrifying warning: that the line between visionary leadership and destructive obsession is far thinner than we like to believe, and that a crew will row cheerfully toward its own destruction if the captain tells the story well enough. That gap, between conviction and vendetta, between a mission and a grudge dressed as one, is one of the most important distances you will ever learn to measure. Ahab wanted his whale more than he wanted his ship, his crew, or his own life. And the tragedy is not only that it killed him, it is that it killed everyone who believed in him, while the whale swam calmly away over the horizon. If this walk through Moby-Dick gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time, we leave the storm-tossed Pacific for something far quieter and just as radical. The Analects of Confucius, a 2,500-year-old handbook on how to be a decent human being, and why the smallest daily habits of character may matter more than any grand mission ever could. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been on an Ahab's ship, strapped to somebody else's obsession? And if you were, did you find the courage to be the one who finally said, out loud, "This is not our business"? Or did you row? I read every reply.